Daytona Beach was a unique circuit that drew the eyes of many spectators, and in many ways led to the NASCAR we know today. But the track led to some pretty dangerous accidents, and none may be as terrifying as the crash we're talking about today. 4 drivers flipping, spectators injured, and drivers' life-saving efforts lead to the incredible story of the Al Briggs tragedy and a crash that should have been even worse. But right before we get into the video, make sure you leave a like if you enjoy it and subscribe so you never miss a video. Big shout out to Hannibal Hamlin 1 for suggesting this story. It's truly incredible. So if you have any suggestions, let me know down in the comments below and I might be able to cover it. We have a lot to get into, so let's get right into the video. Let's set the scene for the accident. It was 1955 at Daytona Beach in the NASCAR Modified Division. It was only the 8th season of NASCAR sanctioned competition. Contrary to popular belief, the modern-day Cup Series was not NASCAR's first series. Instead, it was the Modified Division, which debuted in 1948. As the name implies, it was a form of stock car racing in which some parts could be modified to be stronger or faster. On the other hand, the modern-day Cup Series started off as the strictly stock division in 1949, the year after the Modified Division. NASCAR pioneers and stars littered the field for the 1955 event, including Herb Thomas, Speedy Thompson, Ralph Moody, Joe Weatherly, Lee Petty, Fireball Roberts, and Fonnie Flock, just to name a few. In all, a staggering 80 competitors would see the green flag on the 4-mile circuit, which consisted of a long stretch on the beach of Daytona. The hungry and brave competitors would compete for a grand prize of $900. But more importantly, the prestige of conquering one of the most famed and unique events of the time. Before we get into the race, I want to introduce some of the main characters of the story. Alfred Wallace Briggs was a 30-year-old competitor from Lake Worth, Florida. He was born in Kansas, but moved to Florida at a young age. His father was an auto mechanic, which could explain how Al got into racing in the first place. The World War II Army veteran was a truck driver at the time of his enlistment in 1943. It's unclear what he was doing post-military. Some sources state that he was single with children, but an article written back in 1955 said he had a wife and 4 children. This included a set of twins that were only a few months old at the time of the race. Jimmy Thompson was the brother of NASCAR legend Speedy Thompson. The brothers would race alongside each other and their father in many races in the 50s and 60s. Jimmy would be a racing icon in the South, racing mostly modifieds. He'd make some starts and have success in the Grand National Series. Jimmy was 31 at the time of the race. Cotton Owens is one of the early NASCAR icons and pioneers. Coming into the 1955 Daytona Beach race, Owens had wins in back-to-back years at the track. He definitely had made a name for himself in front of the Daytona crowd. He was the race favorite, a popular figure, and would be starting in the top 5. He'd go on to have a legendary career as a driver and an owner, ultimately being a part of the 2013 NASCAR Hall of Fame class. Jack Bowsher was an Ohio native that would be a pioneer in racing, not in NASCAR, but in the ARCA series. He'd go on to win 49 times according to ARCARacing.com, which sits 3rd on the all-time list to this day. The 3-time series champ was also the father of 2-time champ Bobby Bowsher. Jack raced in all levels of NASCAR and drove in the USAC stock car division. As an owner, he won a USAC title, 2 ARCA championships, and the 24 Hours of Daytona. He was a legend in the making at the time of the 1955 Daytona Beach race. He was just 25 years old. Now, with this information, we can finally get into the race. Ralph Moody, Clarence Johnson, Fireball Roberts, and Banjo Matthews would lead the field to the green. Race favorite Cotton Owens would start behind this group in 5th. Early on in the race, Banjo Matthews, Bill Whitenhouse, and Earl Moss would work their way up to the front of the field. But around lap 17, a chaotic scene would ensue. Motorsportsmemorial.org describes the wreck in the most detail, so I'm going to go off of this account of what happened. Al Briggs and Jimmy Thompson were battling for position, Then the pair spotted trouble on the finish line just up ahead. This was on the asphalt backstretch, not the front stretch on the beach. This backstretch was super narrow, and once a car got sideways there, more cars were bound to pile in. Knowing this, Briggs started to slow up to let Thompson by. From here, Briggs would try to slot in behind Thompson past the slow vehicle on the finish line. However, when trying to get behind Thompson, Briggs clipped the left rear fender of Thompson's car.
Thompson would immediately go flipping into the bushes,
and Briggs would spin on the asphalt. That's when a rapidly closing Cotton Owens would smash into Briggs, unable to avoid his spinning machine. Both of these cars would flip and be set ablaze. Then behind Cotton Owens was Jack Boucher. Seeing 3 cars flipped, 2 on fire, and nowhere to go on the track, Boucher turned to the left, straight into the dunes. His car flipped and hit a spectator's car. Then Boucher's car and the spectator's car rolled into the crowd. As the carnage came to a halt, attention immediately turned to the safety of the spectators and the drivers. As far as the spectators go, 3 were rushed to the hospital: Jack Smith, W.A. Wood, and Donald Pemberton. They would escape with only minor injuries. Luckily, the spectator's vehicle that rolled back into the crowd wasn't moving super quick, and Boucher's car had lost a lot of momentum. Things were different on the driver's side of things. Cotton Owens climbed from his burning machine and ran straight to Al Briggs' car. This was the car that Owens was unable to avoid and ultimately hit. Uninjured, Owens reached in and pulled Briggs from the car while it was burning in an effort to save his life. Owens rolled Briggs in the sands to put out the fire that consumed his body. Despite the life-saving efforts of Owens, Briggs passed away just 9 hours later. The race would continue on for one more lap of yellow, and then it was ended prematurely. Briggs unfortunately had burns all over him. 90% of his body was completely covered. Jack Boucher was released from the hospital the same day of the accident, but Thompson stayed overnight with back and head injuries. So this is bizarre on so many levels. First of all, 4 cars flipped in one accident. Now, this wasn't super uncommon back then, but then you had one racing machine and a spectator's vehicle go into the crowd. I could not imagine the chaos of the accident, especially as soon as it happened. Just everyone scattered trying to help everyone else. Unfortunately, a young Al Briggs in his second start lost his life. So I'm reading between the lines here, but I wonder if Thompson slowed down just a bit more than Briggs thought. Remember, the accident started because Briggs slowed down to slot in behind Thompson, and Briggs clipped his left rear. It's hard to imagine now because NASCAR will throw caution for every little thing, but it wasn't like that at all back in 1955. Instead, you'd still have drivers going full throttle past slow vehicles. There wasn't always a caution. So I wonder if Thompson slowed down a lot, just as Briggs was trying to slot over behind him. Cotton Owens is a legend, and if the wreck was avoidable, I'm sure he would have avoided it. It's just what happens when you have 80 drivers on a narrow track with high stakes. And unfortunately, Briggs lost his life. In the same breath, it could have been even worse. The other drivers involved could have suffered the same fate, or even the spectators. More cars could have piled in. The modified series was not a stranger to having fan fatalities. In 1948 at Columbus, Red Byron penetrated a fence, injuring 16 spectators and taking the life of a young boy. Al's death would be the 7th in just 8 years of the series, making it one of the deadliest stretches in NASCAR history. And that's it for this video. I hope you all did enjoy. Shout out to Hannibal Hamlin 1 for telling me about this story in the comments. I had never heard of it, and I just wonder how many more stories like this there are out there. So hopefully you learned something, hopefully you thought it was interesting, and if you did, make sure you leave a like and subscribe so you never miss another video. That's it for me. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.